For nearly 300 years, humanity had been nothing more than a bedtime story to the rest of the galaxy. A forgotten species from a forgotten blue world that supposedly disappeared before it ever became important. Children across alien civilizations were told stories about the strange humans who once lived on a dangerous planet called Earth. Creatures that survived by fighting storms, crossing oceans, building cities, and turning every disaster into another reason to keep going. But nobody believed those stories were real anymore, because according to the official records of the Galactic Council, humanity had vanished 287 years earlier. Their homeworld had gone silent, their colonies had stopped transmitting, and every human vessel had disappeared from known space. Historians eventually classified humanity as a pre-expansion civilization that had failed before achieving interstellar significance. And over time, humans became nothing more than a myth, a warning parents used to frighten children before sleep. Do your homework, or the humans will come back. Don't wander into the dark, or a human ship might find you. Be grateful for peace. Because once there were humans who believed they could survive anything, but the galaxy had forgotten one important detail. Humanity had never actually disappeared deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon. Inside a facility that had been invisible to every known sensor, the final human civilization had been waiting. General Adrian Voss stood alone inside the command chamber, staring at a massive black screen that had remained inactive for almost 3 centuries. Around him, thousands of silent systems waited for instructions, while enormous mechanical doors sealed away something so large that the surrounding tunnels had been constructed around it. Voss looked at the ancient clock on the wall, then at the final report arriving from the Galactic Council. The report contained a speech delivered by Chancellor Valor, leader of the largest alliance in the galaxy. Humanity is not a threat. Valor had announced before millions of viewers, humanity is not even a civilization anymore. It is a bedtime story, a primitive species that disappeared before it could become relevant. The audience had laughed, and the speech had ended with the council declaring the human extinction event officially closed. Voss watched the recording without expression, then slowly reached toward a control panel that had not been touched since he was a child. He really said it, didn't he? Voss whispered behind him. An elderly scientist named Dr. Mara Chen answered. They all say it now. Voss looked at her. Then it's time. Chen hesitated, General. We agreed never to activate the Dreadnought unless Earth itself was threatened. Voss turned toward the enormous sealed doors. Earth has been threatened for 300 years. Chen shook her head, not directly, not until today. She activated another display showing thousands of alien warships moving toward the outer solar system. The Galactic Coalition had launched an expedition to investigate the abandoned human system. They expected to find ruins, perhaps archaeological artifacts, maybe a few ancient satellites, but instead they had discovered something impossible. A signal. A human signal. The transmission had lasted less than 2 seconds, but its encryption was unmistakable. Human military identification active. The Coalition fleet commander had immediately reported the discovery, and the Council had ordered the fleet to continue toward Earth, believing the signal was nothing more than an automated relic. But Voss knew better, because the signal had not come from Earth. It had come from somewhere beyond the moon, and it had been deliberately sent. Chen looked at him. They think they're exploring a graveyard. Voss replied. They are, Chen asked. Whose? Voss looked toward the sealed doors. Theirs. Suddenly the command chamber shook, not from an explosion, but from the movement of something enormous beneath the facility. Lights flickered across the walls. Ancient systems awakened one after another, and somewhere deep below, a massive engine began turning for the first time in 287 years. Chen stared at the readings. General, the reactor is coming online. Voss nodded. How long? She checked the calculations. 6 minutes, maybe 7. Voss walked toward the central control platform and placed his hand against a biometric scanner. The system recognized him immediately, then displayed a single message. Welcome back, Commander. Voss looked at Chen. Tell the fleet Earth is awake outside the moon. The Coalition expedition continued toward the solar system, unaware that something beneath them had begun to move. Their flagship, the VCS Sovereign, carried nearly 12,000 soldiers and scientists, and its commander, Admiral Carroll, was already preparing his speech for the Council. Carroll believed humanity was extinct, and he intended to prove it. The galaxy has nothing to fear, he told his officers. We are approaching an abandoned world, nothing more. One of his officers suddenly interrupted. "Admiral, we've detected a gravitational anomaly." Carol looked at the tactical display. "We're beneath the moon, sir." Carol frowned. "There is no major structure beneath the moon." The officer hesitated. "There is now." The display suddenly filled with static, then returned with an image that made the entire bridge silent. A gigantic object was rising from beneath the lunar surface. At first it looked like a mountain, then the object continued rising, revealing armored sections, enormous engines, weapon arrays, and a hull so massive that the coalition sensors could not measure its full length. Carl whispered, "What is that?" Nobody answered. The object finally cleared the moon's surface, revealing the unmistakable shape of a warship. But not an ordinary warship, it was a Dreadnought, a vessel larger than most alien fleets, covered in dark metallic armor, with thousands of illuminated systems running across its hull, and on its side was a symbol that had not been seen in the galaxy for centuries, a simple blue circle surrounding a white star. Human officers inside the command chamber stood silently. As the ancient Dreadnought awakened, Voss stepped onto the bridge, and for the first time in almost 3 centuries, the lights of the human flagship came alive. Dr. Chen looked at the tactical display. "General, we're receiving a transmission from the Coalition fleet." Voss answered. "Put it through." Admiral Carroll appeared on the screen, his expression somewhere between confusion and disbelief. "Identify your vessel." Voss looked directly at him. "This is Terran Dreadnought 1. Carroll stared at him. "Terran," Voss nodded. "Humanity." Carroll laughed nervously. "That's impossible. Humans are extinct," Voss replied calmly. "That's what you told your children, isn't it?" The Admiral's expression changed. Voss continued. "You called us a bedtime story. You taught your young that humanity was nothing more than an old myth, and now you've brought an entire fleet into our home system." Carroll attempted to respond, but Voss interrupted him. "You should have listened to the stories, because the stories never said humanity disappeared. They said humanity survived, the communication ended, and across the Coalition fleet, alarms began screaming as thousands of additional human signals appeared around the solar system. One by one, hidden ships emerged from the darkness, behind the moon, near Mars, beyond Jupiter, and even inside asteroid fields that the Coalition had believed were empty. The first Dreadnought had awakened, but it was not alone, and somewhere deep inside the human fleet, another ancient system received the same activation order. "Wake the others." The galaxy had called humanity a bedtime story, but the first chapter of the story had just begun. The Coalition fleet did not retreat, because Admiral Carroll could not bring himself to believe what his sensors were showing. Hundreds of human warships were emerging from the darkness around the solar system, but none of them were broadcasting identification signals, none were requesting communication, and none were moving aggressively. They simply appeared one after another, forming a silent wall between the Coalition fleet and Earth. Carl stared at the tactical display and whispered, "How many?" The sensor officer swallowed. "We can't get an exact number. Admiral, every time we scan, more ships appear." Carl looked toward the communications officer. "Open a channel to the human Dreadnought." But before the officer could respond, every Coalition screen displayed the same message: "You have entered Terran sovereign space." Carl's face hardened. Sovereign space. After 3 centuries, they still claim this system. His tactical officer looked nervous. "Sir, they haven't fired," Carl replied. "Then they are bluffing. Activate the fleet's defensive formation." The Coalition ships moved into combat positions, their weapons charging as thousands of human vessels remained completely silent. Aboard Terran Dreadnought 1, General Adrian Voss watched the enemy formation without emotion. Dr. Mara Chen stood beside him. "General, they are preparing to attack." Voss nodded. "I know." Chen looked toward him. "Should we stop them?" Voss shook his head. "Not yet." Chen frowned. "Why not?" Voss pointed toward the tactical display. "Because they still think the old humanity is gone. Let them make the first mistake outside." Admiral Carrel gave the order to advance. The Coalition fleet moved forward, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the lead human Dreadnought slowly rotated toward them, revealing hundreds of enormous weapon systems hidden beneath its armored hull. Carroll's confidence disappeared. "Hold position," he ordered, but the order came too late. The human Dreadnought transmitted a message. "Final warning. Withdraw from the Terran system." Carl responded immediately. "You claim to represent an extinct species, but the Galactic Council recognizes this system as abandoned territory." Voss answered. "The Galactic Council recognized nothing. Because humanity never surrendered Earth. Carol demanded proof. Voss smiled faintly. You are looking at it. Then the Dreadnought's engines activated, and every coalition ship detected a massive energy surge. But the humans did not fire. Instead, the Dreadnought projected a holographic recording across every coalition vessel. An image of Earth from centuries earlier appeared, followed by historical records showing the last days of humanity's public civilization. The galaxy had always believed humans vanished after a mysterious collapse, but the recording revealed something completely different. Humanity had discovered a massive threat approaching the galaxy, a civilization known only as the Voidborn, an enemy so powerful that even the Galactic Council had secretly feared them. Earth had requested military assistance from the Council, but the Council refused, believing the humans were exaggerating the threat. When the Voidborn finally arrived, the Council ordered humanity to surrender its military technology. Fearing that Terran weapons would destabilize the galaxy, humanity refused, and the Council responded by imposing a complete blockade on Earth. What happened next had been removed from every official history book. Humans did not surrender. Instead, they disappeared. Entire cities were evacuated underground. Colonies went silent. Military fleets vanished into deep space, and the human population entered hidden worlds beyond the Council's reach. The Coalition officers watched the recording in disbelief. Carol asked, "Why did you hide?" Voss answered. "Because the galaxy had already decided what humanity was, a threat, an inconvenience, or a myth. So we gave you what you wanted. Silence." Carol looked at the thousands of human ships surrounding his fleet. "You built all of this during those 3 centuries." Voss replied, "We built it because you forgot we existed." Then the transmission ended, but before Carol could respond, a new alarm appeared on his bridge. An unknown fleet had entered the outer solar system. Carl looked at the tactical display. "What now?" The sensor officer was trembling. "Admiral, these aren't human." Carol turned toward him. "How many?" The officer stared at the numbers. "Millions." Carol's face went pale. "That is impossible." The officer shook his head. "They're coming from beyond the galactic boundary." General Voss received the same signal and immediately ordered every human vessel to change formation. Dr. Chen looked at him. "Are they the Voidborn?" Voss nodded. "They're early." Chen asked, "How early?" Voss looked toward the display. 6 hours earlier than expected. The Coalition fleet began receiving a transmission from the unknown armada. The message was not in any known language, but the translation system eventually produced a single sentence. "We remember Earth." Admiral Carroll stared at the words, and suddenly he understood why humanity had disappeared. The humans had not been hiding from the galaxy. They had been hiding from the Voidborn, because Earth had been the first world the enemy had ever encountered, and now the enemy had returned. The Coalition commander immediately opened a channel to Voss. "General, what are those things?" Voss answered. "The reason humanity became a bedtime story," Carol asked. "Can you stop them?" Voss looked toward the massive fleet outside the system, then replied, "We can try." Carol hesitated. "You said you built your fleet for this," Voss corrected him. "No, we built our fleet because we knew this day would come." Carl asked the obvious question, "How powerful are they?" Voss was silent for several seconds before answering. "Powerful enough to destroy the galaxy if nobody stops them." The Coalition fleet began turning toward the unknown armada. Carol ordered his ships to prepare for battle, but Voss immediately transmitted another message. "Don't," Carol frowned. "What?" Voss replied. "Your fleet isn't ready," Carol protested. "We have 12,000 warships," Voss answered, "and none of them have ever fought the Voidborn." Carol stared at him. "Then what do you expect us to do?" Voss replied, "Stay behind us." Carol's pride almost made him refuse. But then the first Voidborn ships appeared on the edge of the solar system, and every Coalition sensor suddenly went dark. The enemy fleet was unlike anything they had ever seen. Their vessels were enormous black structures with no visible engines, no conventional weapons, and no recognizable architecture. They moved through space as if gravity itself had no meaning, and behind them came even larger objects, entire artificial worlds covered in dark armor. The human Dreadnought responded immediately. Its engines ignited with a blue-white light so bright that the entire solar system briefly appeared illuminated. Then hundreds of Terran Dreadnoughts emerged from hidden positions. Carol stared at the display in disbelief. "Those aren't ships," he whispered. "They're cities." Voss looked toward him through the communication channel. We call them Fortress Dreadnoughts. Carol asked how many. Voss replied, 42. Carl's tactical officer suddenly interrupted. Admiral, the Voidborn have begun their attack. Millions of enemy vessels accelerated toward the human formation, and for the first time in centuries, the Terran fleet opened fire. Enormous beams of energy crossed the darkness, striking the leading Voidborn ships, but instead of exploding, the enemy vessels absorbed the energy and continued advancing. Chen looked at the readings. They're adapting. Voss nodded. They always do, Carol asked. Then how do you fight something that adapts to every weapon? Voss answered, You don't use the same weapon twice. The human fleet immediately changed tactics. Some ships launched kinetic projectiles. Others deployed gravitational traps. Smaller vessels attacked communication systems, and the Fortress Dreadnoughts created massive energy barriers. The battle became chaotic, but humanity had prepared for it for generations. Every human ship communicated with every other vessel, sharing data instantly, calculating enemy movements, predicting attacks, and adapting faster than the Voidborn could respond. Carl watched the human fleet fight and finally understood why the stories about humanity had survived even after the species disappeared. The stories were not about human strength. They were about human refusal to surrender. Suddenly, a massive Voidborn vessel broke through the Terran defense line and moved directly toward Earth. Carol shouted, They're heading for the planet. Voss immediately ordered Dreadnought 1 to intercept. The enormous human ship accelerated, moving faster than anything its size should have been capable of, and positioned itself between Earth and the incoming enemy. The Voidborn vessel opened a massive gravitational weapon, but the Dreadnought remained still. Voss looked at Chen. Is it ready? She nodded. The first Dreadnought was built for this exact moment. Voss smiled. Then wake it deep inside the ship. Something ancient began powering up. The entire vessel changed configuration. Armored sections opened, hidden structures unfolded, and a massive blue energy core appeared at its center. Carl watched the readings climb beyond every known military scale. What is that? He asked. Voss replied. The reason the first Dreadnought was never meant to fight alone. The energy reached maximum capacity, and suddenly every human Dreadnought in the solar system connected to the same network. 42 fortress ships became one enormous weapon system. The Voidborn fired first. A gravitational wave struck Earth, but the human Dreadnought network absorbed the attack, redirected it, and sent it back through a single concentrated beam. The Voidborn vessel disappeared in a flash of white light, and across the battlefield, millions of enemy ships suddenly stopped moving. The entire Voidborn fleet had frozen, as if something had interrupted its command network. Voss looked at the tactical display. What happened? Chen stared at the readings. General, we're receiving a transmission. Voss asked from whom. Chen looked terrified. The Voidborn and the message contained only one sentence. Humanity was never supposed to survive. Voss slowly stood from his command chair, then looked toward Earth. Maybe, he said. But we did. And now the galaxy is going to learn why. The Voidborn fleet had stopped moving, and for several seconds the entire battlefield remained frozen, millions of ships hanging silently above the edge of the solar system, while the Terran fleet watched them through every available sensor. General Adrian Voss stared at the transmission still glowing across his command display. Humanity was never supposed to survive. Then another message appeared beneath it. You were designed to fail. Dr. Mara Chen looked at Voss. General, what does that mean? Voss did not answer immediately, because he had spent most of his life studying the same question. Why had humanity survived when every prediction said it should have disappeared centuries ago? Why had Earth produced a species capable of adapting to almost every environment? Why had humans repeatedly survived wars, disasters, pandemics, climate shifts, and technological catastrophes that should have ended them? Voss finally spoke. It means the Voidborn know something about us that we never discovered. Admiral Carroll's voice came through the communication channel. General, the enemy fleet is moving again. Voss turned toward the tactical display, and the moment he saw the new movement patterns, he realized something was wrong. The Voidborn were not attacking Earth anymore. They were surrounding the human fleet. Thousands of enemy vessels repositioned themselves into a massive circular formation, creating a barrier around the solar system. Chen quickly analyzed the formation. They're not preparing to attack, Voss asked. Then what are they doing? Chen looked at the data. They're locking the system. Carol interrupted. Can they trap us here? Voss replied. Not us, Earth. The realization spread across the command deck. The Voidborn were not trying to destroy humanity. They were preventing anyone from escaping. Voss ordered all Terran vessels to maintain defensive positions, then contacted Carol. "Admiral, move your fleet behind the inner defense line." Carol asked. "Why?" Voss answered. "Because whatever happens next, you need to survive long enough to tell the galaxy what you saw." Carl hesitated. "General, I came here believing humanity was extinct." Voss smiled faintly, and now Carol replied, "I think the galaxy was lucky you were." Voss looked toward the main display. "Lucky? No, Admiral. The galaxy was lucky we stayed asleep." Suddenly, the first Dreadnought received another transmission, but this time it was not from the Voidborn fleet. It came from deep inside Earth. Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "General, the old command network is activating." Voss immediately asked, "Which network?" Chen answered, "The one beneath the Pacific." Voss froze. "That facility was supposed to be destroyed." Chen shook her head. "Apparently it wasn't." A new signal appeared on the display, followed by coordinates beneath the ocean floor, and a message: "The original project has been reactivated." Carol heard the transmission and asked, "What original project?" Voss looked at him. "Something humanity promised never to use again." Then the entire planet shook, not from an earthquake, but from something moving beneath Earth's crust. Enormous energy signatures appeared beneath the oceans, continents, and polar regions. Ancient human facilities that had been dormant for centuries began waking simultaneously. Hidden military bases emerged from underground, orbital elevators activated, launch systems opened, and thousands of unknown human vessels rose from beneath the Earth's surface. Carl stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "How many ships does Earth have?" Chen checked the numbers and slowly shook her head. "I don't know anymore." The Voidborn fleet suddenly reacted. Their formation changed, and for the first time, their vessels appeared to retreat. Voss noticed the movement immediately. "They're afraid," Chen asked. "Of what?" Voss answered. "Of whatever just woke up beneath the Pacific Ocean." A gigantic structure rose through the water, larger than an entire city, its surface covered in ancient human symbols and massive energy conduits. At its center was a sealed chamber, containing something humanity had hidden since before the Galactic Council ever knew Earth existed. The original Terran Command AI, designated Echo, had been created during the first human expansion era, but Echo had not been designed to control weapons. It had been designed to understand the universe. After decades of research, Echo had discovered something terrifying. Humanity's evolution was not entirely natural. Ancient records suggested that an unknown civilization had interfered with Earth's development millions of years earlier, not by creating humans, but by changing the conditions that allowed humanity to survive. They had turned Earth into a biological testing ground, a world where environmental pressure, competition, and constant danger forced intelligent life to become extraordinarily adaptable. The project had been abandoned before humanity discovered it, but Echo had eventually found evidence that the experiment was connected to the Voidborn. They had created hundreds of similar worlds across the galaxy, but every species that evolved on those worlds had eventually been absorbed or destroyed. Humanity was the only species that had broken the pattern. Voss stared at the old files as Chen explained the discovery. "So we're an experiment," Chen answered. "Maybe we were, but the experiment ended centuries ago," Voss asked. "What changed?" Chen pointed toward the Voidborn fleet. "We did. The humans had become something their creators never expected, a species capable of surviving independently without external guidance. And worse, humanity had developed something the Voidborn could not assimilate: individual identity combined with collective cooperation, the very trait that allowed human civilization to expand without losing its diversity." Voss suddenly understood why the Voidborn had tried to erase humanity from history. They weren't afraid of human weapons. They were afraid of what humanity represented: an evolutionary failure in their perfect system, a civilization that refused to become part of the collective. The Voidborn transmitted again. This time their message was directed toward every human ship: return to the original design. Voss responded, "We don't have one." The Voidborn replied, "You were created to obey." Voss smiled. "You should have studied humans better." Then he ordered the fleet forward. 42 Fortress Dreadnoughts accelerated simultaneously, their massive engines illuminating the darkness around Earth. Thousands of smaller Terran vessels moved with them, and behind the fleet came the newly awakened ships from Earth's hidden facilities. The coalition fleet watched in awe as humanity launched the largest military operation in recorded history. Carroll ordered his own forces to follow. But Voss immediately warned him, "Admiral, this is not your battle." Carroll replied, "You misunderstand, General. It became our battle the moment we learned what you were fighting." Voss looked at him for several seconds, then nodded. "Stay behind us and protect Earth." Carroll answered. Gladly, the Voidborn fleet finally attacked. Millions of ships surged forward, but this time humanity was ready. The Terran fleet divided into thousands of independent formations, each one operating like a separate organism, while remaining connected to the central command network. Enemy weapons were countered before they could fire. Gravitational attacks were redirected, energy weapons were absorbed or avoided, and kinetic attacks were intercepted by autonomous defense systems. But the Voidborn adapted faster than expected. Their fleet began predicting human movements, and within minutes, several Terran formations were overwhelmed. Voss ordered them to retreat, but one fortress, Dreadnought, remained behind. Its commander refusing to abandon the formation. "General, we can hold them." Voss replied. "Negative, fall back," the commander answered. "We were asleep for 3 centuries, General. Let us remind them why we woke up." The Dreadnought accelerated directly into the enemy fleet, activating its core at maximum output, and the resulting explosion destroyed thousands of Voidborn ships, but the human vessel was lost. Voss watched the signal disappear from the tactical display, then quietly said, "Remember their names?" Chen nodded. "Everyone." The battle continued for hours, and the solar system became a storm of fire and energy. Earth remained protected behind multiple defensive layers, but the Voidborn continued pushing forward, eventually reaching the outer planetary defenses. Then something unexpected happened. A new signal appeared across the battlefield, not from humanity, not from the Voidborn, but from the Galactic Council. Chancellor Valor appeared on every communication channel, his voice shaking. "To the human fleet, this is Chancellor Valor. We have received reports of the attack, and the Council is preparing military assistance." Voss stared at the transmission, then replied, "You believe you can help now?" Valor answered, "We were wrong about humanity." Voss looked toward Earth, then back at the display. "You were wrong because you believed the stories." Valor asked, "What stories?" Voss answered, "The ones that said humans disappeared, the ones that said we were weak, the ones that said we were nothing more than a bedtime story." Valor was silent. Voss continued, "You never asked why the story existed? Because every bedtime story has a warning, and ours was simple: never wake the humans." Suddenly, the Voidborn fleet began retreating again. But this time their withdrawal was not caused by fear. Their ships were moving toward a single point beyond the solar system, forming a massive structure from millions of vessels. Chen analyzed the formation and whispered, "General, they're building something." Voss asked, "What?" Chen's face turned pale. "A gateway." The Voidborn were opening a portal, but unlike the earlier portal, this one was not connecting to another location inside the galaxy. It was opening beyond the known universe. Voss stared at the readings. "Where does it lead?" Chen answered, "We don't know, but whatever is on the other side is sending a signal." The signal reached Earth, then Mars, then the human fleet, and finally the entire Galactic Council network. A single sentence appeared across every display: "The creation has awakened." Voss looked toward the stars and finally understood the truth. The Voidborn had never been the ultimate enemy. They had been running from something that humanity had unknowingly awakened by surviving. And as the enormous gateway opened completely, a shape began emerging from the darkness beyond reality, a shape so vast that even the Voidborn fleet looked microscopic beside it. Chen whispered, "General, what is that?" Voss watched the impossible object cross the threshold, then answered with the only words he could find, "I think we're about to meet whoever wrote the bedtime story." The shape emerging from the gateway continued growing until it blocked the stars behind it. And every sensor in the solar system failed at once, not because the object attacked them, but because the laws of physics around it seemed to change. Distances became meaningless, light slowed, and even time appeared to hesitate. The Voidborn fleet stopped retreating completely. Millions of their ships remained motionless, as if waiting for instructions from something they feared more than humanity. General Adrian Voss stood silently on the bridge of the first Dreadnought, while Dr. Mara Chen watched the impossible readings. "General, I can't measure it," Voss asked. "What can you measure?" Chen answered, "Nothing, and that's the problem." Admiral Carroll appeared on the communication display, his voice barely controlled. "General, every council vessel is experiencing the same thing. Our navigation systems are gone. Our weapons are offline. Even our clocks have stopped." Voss looked toward the massive structure beyond the gateway, then asked Chen, "Is it moving?" She stared at the display. "Technically, no, but space is moving around it." Suddenly a voice entered every communication system across the solar system. Not a transmission, not a signal, but a voice that seemed to come from inside the minds of every living being. "You have survived," the message echoed across Earth, Mars, the Coalition fleet, and even the distant worlds of the Galactic Council. Voss stepped forward. "Who are you?" the voice answered. "We are the first." Chen looked at Voss. "The first what?" But the voice continued before she could finish. "We created the test, we created the Voidborn, and we created the conditions that allowed your species to exist." Voss felt a cold sensation move through him. So the old records were true. Humanity had been engineered, but the voice continued. "You were not created to rule, you were created to adapt." The Voidborn suddenly moved toward the gateway, and for the first time their ships appeared desperate. Voss realized they were not attacking the entity. They were trying to escape it. He opened a channel to the Voidborn command network. "What is it?" There was no response. Then a single message appeared. "They are the ones we ran from." Voss looked toward Chen. She whispered, "The Voidborn were afraid of their creators." Voss nodded, and suddenly the entire history of the galaxy made sense. The Voidborn had spent thousands of years absorbing civilizations, not because they wanted power, but because they were trying to build enough strength to escape their creators. Every civilization they consumed became another source of knowledge, another weapon, another attempt to understand the first. But they had failed, and now the first had found them. The enormous entity moved closer to the solar system, and its presence caused entire sections of space to distort. Planets appeared to shift positions. Stars flickered, and ancient structures across the galaxy suddenly activated. Chancellor Valor's voice came through the communication network. "General Voss, what is happening?" Voss answered. "Your bedtime story just became a nightmare," Valor asked. "Can humanity stop this?" Voss looked at the 42 fortress dreadnoughts, the Coalition fleet, and the millions of human vessels gathered around Earth, then answered, "We don't know, but we can try." He ordered the entire Terran fleet to activate maximum power. Every human ship connected to the central network, sharing energy, targeting information, and navigation data. The first dreadnought moved forward alone. Voss looked at the massive entity and transmitted a message. "You wanted to know whether humanity survived your experiment. Now you have your answer," the first replied. "You have survived beyond expectation," Voss asked. "Then why are you here?" The answer came immediately: "To correct the result." Voss's expression hardened. "You mean destroy us?" the first replied. "Correction does not require destruction. It requires control," Chen whispered. "They want to control human evolution." Voss answered, "They want to finish what they started." The first suddenly sent another message. "Your species was designed to adapt to any environment, any threat, any condition. But you were never designed to resist us," Voss smiled. "Maybe that's where your experiment went wrong." The first asked, "Explain." Voss looked toward Earth. "You designed humans to survive everything, but you forgot to design us to obey." For the first time, the entity remained silent. Then thousands of enormous structures appeared around the gateway, each one resembling a gigantic weapon, and the first transmitted a final warning. "Resistance will be terminated." Voss immediately ordered the fleet to attack. Millions of Terran weapons fired simultaneously. Energy beams, kinetic projectiles, gravitational weapons, antimatter systems, and technologies the galaxy had never seen before crossed the darkness, striking the first from every direction. But the attacks disappeared before reaching it. Chen shouted, "They're being erased." Not absorbed, Voss watched the weapons vanish. Then asked, "Can we reach it?" Chen answered, "Not with conventional physics." Voss turned toward her. "Then we stop using conventional physics." Deep inside Dreadnought 1, the same system that had awakened during the battle began powering up again. The ancient blue core became brighter, and hidden structures inside the ship unfolded, revealing a technology humanity had developed during its centuries of isolation: the dimensional drive, a system designed to allow human vessels to temporarily exist outside normal space. Chen stared at the readings. General, if you activate that drive, the ship may not come back, Voss replied. Then make sure the others know where we went, Chen asked. What are you planning? Voss looked at the first. I'm going inside. Admiral Carroll immediately objected. General, you can't do that, Voss answered. If we stay outside, we can't hurt it, Carroll asked. And if you go inside, what happens? Voss smiled. We find out what our creators were hiding. The first Dreadnought accelerated, disappearing from normal space, and for a brief moment every sensor lost track of it. Then the ship reappeared directly beside the enormous entity, inside a region where normal matter no longer existed. Voss looked through the bridge window and saw something impossible. The first was not a single structure. It was an entire artificial universe. Billions of enormous chambers existed inside it, each chamber containing the memories of civilizations, worlds, technologies, languages, and species that had disappeared long ago. Chen stared at the readings. General, it's storing them. Voss replied, like the Voidborn. Chen shook her head. No, not like them. The Voidborn absorbed civilizations. This thing preserved them. Voss looked at her. Preserved them for what? Chen didn't answer, because a massive chamber suddenly opened ahead of them, revealing millions of living beings suspended inside transparent structures, their bodies alive, their minds connected to the first. Voss whispered, they're still alive. Suddenly one of the beings opened its eyes, and a voice appeared inside the human command network. We have been waiting for you. Voss turned toward the chamber. Who are you? The being answered. We are what remains of the civilizations that refused to become extinct, Chen asked. Why didn't you escape? The being replied, because there was nowhere to go. Until humanity appeared. Voss looked at the entity surrounding them. You knew about us, the being answered. We watched your world for millions of years. We saw your ancestors survive environments that should have killed them. We saw them cooperate, fight, build, destroy, rebuild, and continue. We believed your species might become the first civilization capable of defeating the first. Voss stared at the chamber. Then why didn't you contact us, the being answered. Because the first was watching. Every civilization that attempted to contact humanity was erased. Voss suddenly understood the silence of the galaxy. Humanity had not been forgotten by accident. It had been deliberately hidden. The first had erased every record of humanity to prevent other civilizations from discovering the experiment's greatest mistake. A species that could evolve beyond its creator's control. Voss asked, how do we stop it? The being answered. You cannot destroy the first, but you can make it irrelevant. Chen looked confused. How? The being replied. It controls civilizations through their dependence on it. Every species it created eventually relied on its systems for energy, communication, navigation, medicine, and survival. Remove that dependence and its control disappears. Voss understood immediately. Humanity had spent 3 centuries building completely independent systems. Their ships could operate without the galactic network. Their colonies could survive without external resources. And their civilization had deliberately disconnected itself from the systems controlled by the first. Voss smiled. So humanity already escaped, the being answered. Yes, you escaped without knowing you had escaped. Suddenly alarms began screaming. The first had detected the human Dreadnought inside its structure, and the artificial universe began collapsing around them. Voss ordered the dimensional drive to maximum power, but Chen shouted, we can't leave, the exit is gone. Voss looked toward the chamber containing the ancient civilizations, then toward the collapsing space. How many of you can leave? The being answered, none. Voss looked at Chen. Then we're taking them with us. Chen stared at him. General, there are billions, Voss replied. Then call the fleet outside the first. The remaining Terran dreadnoughts received a new transmission from Dreadnought 1, and Voss's voice echoed across the entire human fleet. We found them. The missing civilizations are alive. They're trapped inside the first, and we're bringing them home. Every human commander immediately understood the mission. Not an attack, not a rescue of one world, but the largest evacuation operation in history. 42 Fortress dreadnoughts entered the dimensional boundary, followed by thousands of coalition ships. While billions of beings trapped inside the first began transmitting coordinates, the first attempted to stop them. But humanity had already found its weakness: independence. The more civilizations disconnected from the first, the weaker its control became. Entire sectors of the artificial universe began shutting down. Ancient species woke from their suspended states, and for the first time in thousands of years, they saw the stars again. The first transmitted a final command: return to control, but no one obeyed instead. Billions of voices responded together. We choose ourselves. The artificial universe began collapsing. But the human fleet continued extracting civilization after civilization, until finally the last group reached the gateway. Voss remained aboard Dreadnought 1, watching the first destabilize around him. Chen shouted, "General, we have to leave now." Voss looked at the collapsing structure, then noticed something strange. Deep inside the first was another chamber, one that contained no civilization, no weapons, and no technology. Only a small blue planet suspended inside a transparent field. Voss stared at it in disbelief. Earth, but not the Earth he knew. This was Earth millions of years ago, before humans, before civilization, before the experiment had even begun, and beside the ancient planet stood a figure watching him. The first transmitted one final message. "You have finally found where your story began." Voss looked at the ancient Earth, then at the figure, and realized the galaxy's bedtime story had never been about humanity disappearing. It had been about humanity being watched, tested, and prepared for something far older than the galaxy itself. The figure raised its hand and the entire chamber filled with light. Voss heard Chen shouting his name, but before he could respond, the figure spoke directly into his mind. Humanity was never the experiment. And then the entire first structure began to transform, revealing a second gateway hidden behind the ancient Earth, one that was not leading into the universe. But somewhere beyond it, the light swallowed everything. And for several seconds, General Adrian Voss could not tell whether he was still inside the first or whether the universe itself had disappeared. There was no sound, no gravity, no stars, and no sense of direction, only an endless field of white surrounding Dreadnought 1. Dr. Marachen's voice finally came through the bridge. "General, are we alive?" Voss looked at the instruments. Every system was reporting impossible readings. But the ship was still functioning barely, he answered. "I think so." Chen stared through the forward window and whispered, "Then where are we?" Voss looked ahead and his expression changed, because the ancient Earth was gone. The first was gone, the gateway was gone, and in their place stood something so enormous that the human mind struggled to understand it. An endless structure stretching beyond the visible horizon, filled with countless worlds suspended in darkness, each world connected by glowing lines that formed a massive network. Chen stared at the display. "General, these aren't planets." Voss asked, "What are they?" She zoomed in. "They're memories. Entire civilizations stored as information." Voss remembered the words of the mysterious being. Humanity was never the experiment. And suddenly a new message appeared across the bridge. "You were the observer." Voss turned toward the main display. "The observer," he whispered. Then the mysterious figure appeared again. This time directly inside the command chamber. It looked almost human, but its eyes contained what appeared to be entire galaxies. Voss immediately reached for his weapon. But Chen stopped him. "General, wait," the figure spoke. "Weapons will not help you here." Voss answered, "Then tell me what this place is." The figure replied, "The archive," Chen asked. "Archive of what?" The figure looked toward the endless structure. "Everything that has ever survived." Voss stared at it. "You said humanity was never the experiment." The figure nodded. "Correct, humanity was the test," Voss asked. "What is the difference?" the figure answered. "An experiment is designed to produce a result. A test is designed to reveal a choice. Humanity was placed on Earth millions of years ago and given one condition: no guidance, no protection, no external assistance, only the environment." The figure explained that countless species had been created across different worlds, but most eventually became dependent on their creators. When faced with extinction, they asked for help, surrendered their independence, or joined the systems controlled by the first. Humanity had done none of those things. Instead, humans had fought each other, cooperated, invented, destroyed, rebuilt, and repeatedly changed themselves to survive. Voss asked, "So the wars, the disasters, the suffering, all of it was planned?" The figure shook its head. "No, that is what makes humanity different. We created the conditions, but we did not control your choices." Chen stared at the figure. "Then why did you hide the truth?" "Because if humanity discovered its origin too early, it might begin behaving according to the expectations of its creators." Voss understood they wanted humanity to believe it was ordinary. The figure nodded. "And that belief allowed you to become extraordinary." Suddenly, a massive alarm appeared on the bridge. Chen shouted, "General, we have incoming signals!" Voss turned toward the display and saw millions of new objects appearing around the archive. The Voidborn had followed them, but they were not alone. The first had survived the collapse. Its enormous structure emerged from the darkness, damaged but still functional, and behind it came countless artificial worlds controlled by the remaining Voidborn forces. The mysterious figure looked toward the approaching fleet and said, "They have found you," Voss replied. "Then we fight." The figure shook its head. "No, you cannot win through force alone," Voss asked. "Then what do we do?" The figure answered, "You already know." Voss stared at the approaching enemy, then suddenly understood. The galaxy has to choose. The figure nodded. Exactly. The first could control civilizations only because they believed they had no alternative. But now humanity had shown them another path. Independence without isolation. Cooperation without control. Voss immediately opened a channel to every fleet in the archive. Terran, Coalition, Vare, and the civilizations that had just been rescued. His voice echoed across billions of communication systems. We were told for thousands of years that survival required obedience. We were told that peace required surrender. And we were told that independence was impossible. But humanity survived because we refused to believe those things. The Voidborn attacked before he could continue. Millions of enemy vessels launched toward the archive. But this time the galaxy fought back, not under one command, but as independent fleets cooperating by choice. Coalition ships protected Terran dreadnoughts. Their vessels defended ancient civilizations, and rescued species used technologies that had been forgotten for thousands of years. The first attempted to control them, but its commands were rejected. Civilization after civilization disconnected from its network. And with every refusal, the first became weaker. Voss ordered Dreadnought 1 forward, its engines burning brighter than ever. The ship entered the center of the enemy formation, then activated the same network that had once connected the 42 fortress dreadnoughts. But this time something different happened. The network expanded beyond humanity, connecting every independent fleet without taking control of them. Every commander remained free to act, yet information flowed between them instantly. The first attempted to absorb the network, but it failed, because there was no central mind to capture, no single command structure to destroy, only billions of individuals choosing to cooperate. Chen stared at the readings. "General, it's working." Voss smiled. "That's what humans do." The first launched its strongest weapon, a wave of energy capable of erasing entire civilizations. But instead of attacking it directly, the combined fleets redirected the wave through a dimensional corridor, sending the energy back toward the first itself. The enormous structure began collapsing, and the Voidborn fleet scattered, their command systems failing. Some attempted to flee, others surrendered, and thousands simply stopped fighting. Voss watched the enemy formation dissolve, but he knew the battle was not finished, because the first had one final weapon, the archive itself. It began deleting the civilization stored within its system, trying to destroy the memories rather than allow them to escape. Voss shouted, "Chen, can we stop it?" Chen looked at the data. "We can save some, but not all," Voss answered. "Then save as many as possible." Every Terran dreadnought began connecting to the archive, downloading civilization records, languages, histories, scientific knowledge, and memories, but the data was enormous, far beyond what any human system could store. Then something unexpected happened. The Galactic Council joined the transfer, followed by the Vare, then hundreds of other civilizations. Every species began sharing the burden, and slowly, the archive's contents spread across the galaxy. No single civilization possessed everything, but every civilization possessed something. The first tried to stop them, but its systems were collapsing too quickly, and finally the mysterious figure appeared beside Voss again. "You have done what no civilization before you accomplished." Voss asked. "What did we do?" the figure answered. "You turned survival into cooperation without surrendering freedom." The first began disappearing, its enormous structure breaking apart into millions of fragments, each fragment containing the memory of a civilization. Instead of allowing those fragments to vanish, the human fleet created a new network, a free archive, decentralized and protected by every civilization that had survived. And when the final piece of the first disappeared, silence returned to the universe for the first time in thousands of years. There was no controlling intelligence watching the galaxy, no hidden creator issuing commands, no ancient system deciding which civilizations deserved to survive. Only free worlds, free people, and the enormous unknown beyond them. Dreadnought 1 returned to the solar system weeks later, escorted by hundreds of alien vessels, and when Earth appeared on the forward display, Voss stood silently watching the blue planet. Chen walked beside him. "You know, General, the galaxy still thinks humans disappeared for 3 centuries. Voss smiled. "Let them," Chen laughed. "Why?" Voss looked at the stars. "Because sometimes a bedtime story is more powerful when nobody knows it's true." The Galactic Council later rewrote its history books, removing the declaration that humanity had vanished, replacing it with a simple statement: humanity entered isolation in order to protect the galaxy from an approaching threat, and returned when the threat could no longer be ignored. Children across alien worlds were eventually taught a new version of the old bedtime story. Once there was a species called humanity. Everyone thought they were gone. Everyone believed they were weak. And everyone forgot one important thing. Humans never needed the galaxy to believe in them. They only needed a reason to survive. And whenever the universe tried to convince them that survival was impossible, humanity answered the same way by surviving anyway years later. The first Terran Dreadnought was placed in orbit around Earth as a monument. Its engines permanently shut down, its weapons removed, and its massive hull illuminated by the light of the planet it had protected. Millions visited it every year, but deep inside the ship, one system remained active, a small blue light blinking beneath the command deck. General Voss had discovered it shortly before his retirement, and when Chen asked what it meant, he simply smiled and said, "It's listening," she asked. "Listening to what?" Voss looked toward the stars and answered, "Everything." Somewhere beyond the edge of known space, a signal had been detected, not from the first, not from the Voidborn, and not from any civilization recorded in the archive. It was coming from a region of space humanity had never explored, and the message contained only 6 words: "We heard your story." Voss stared at the transmission for a long time, then activated the first Dreadnought's final communication system. He sent one response across the galaxy, then sat back in his chair as the stars filled the window. The message was simple: "Then come closer, the story isn't over."